Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video I'll be showing you all the rules you need to know to play your first game of Age of Sigmar. You'll see the core concepts of the game, we'll have a look at the Warscrolls, and then work our way through each of the phases, including the Hero Phase, Movement Phase, Shooting Phase, Charge Phase, Combat Phase, and the Battleshock Phase. I'll put a link in the description down below where you can go to the Warhammer Age of Sigmar website and download the core rules for free. I recommend getting hold of this free PDF and using it alongside this video to help you learn the game. The rules in this free PDF are exactly the same as you'll find in the core book. They're all official, and this is a download that's available directly from Games Workshop. Right, let's get started, and first up we'll have a look at the core concepts. To play a game of Warhammer Age of Sigmar, first you'll need to pick your faction. Each faction will come with a battle tome with all the rules you need to play them, including their war scrolls. Once you've chosen your faction, then you'll need to build your models, get them painted, and then have an enemy to play against. Your models will now be organised into units, and a unit is a group of one or more models that use the same war scroll. Let's have a look at a war scroll, and in this example you can see we have the name, then we've got the characteristics of the model, including the move, save, bravery and wounds. Then we've got the characteristics of their weapons. This includes the weapon name, the range, how many attacks you can make with it, the number you need to roll to hit, the number to roll to wound, the rend value, and then the damage. Over here you can see a brief example of the model or unit, and then you've got lots of different abilities that the model can carry out during a game. Then right at the bottom you can see in this section you'll have all the keywords that will refer to different rules as you play the game. Units must be set up and finish every move as a single coherent group. A unit with 2 to 5 models is coherent if each model in the unit is within 1 inch horizontally and 6 inches vertically of at least one other model in the unit. A unit with more than 5 models is coherent if each model in the unit is within 1 inch horizontally and 6 inches vertically of at least 2 other models in the unit. If a friendly unit is not coherent at the end of a turn or after you set it up, you must remove models in the unit from play one at a time until that unit is coherent. Once you've picked your army, you've got to pick one model to be your general, and generals are used to generate command points. We'll cover the command points in a little while. In Age of Sigmar, distances are measured in inches. The distance between 2 models is measured between the closest points on the bases of the models. To measure these distances, you're going to need a tape measure or some kind of device to measure the distance. You'll also need some dice, and Age of Sigmar uses 6-sided dice. Now you've got your army, your enemy, and the tools you need to do battle. Now it's time to prepare your battlefield. For your battlefield, you'll need a large space to play on, typically 44 by 60 inches is ideal, and some terrain. In this video, we won't worry about the terrain features and associated rules, but I will be covering those in a future video. With the battlefield ready, it's time to deploy your units. Players take turns laying down one unit at a time until all units are placed on the battlefield. Some units can be set up outside of the battlefield as a reserve unit, and they'll be brought on during a movement phase. If they're not set up by the start of the 4th battle round, any units in reserve are destroyed. Now we've got everything in place, it's time to begin the battle, and a battle is fought in a series of battle rounds. At the start of the battle round, the players will make a priority roll, and then each player takes one turn. Each turn is split into 6 phases. Once each player has taken their turn, it is the end of the battle round, and then a new battle round begins. Let's look at the priority roll. The players now roll off. The winner has priority in that battle round and must decide who will take the first turn and who will take the second turn. If the priority roll is a tie, do not roll off again. Instead, if it is the first battle round, the player who finished deploying their army first has priority. In any other round, the player who went first in the previous battle round has priority. Now we know who's going to go first, it's time to issue command points, and the player who will take the first turn will now receive 1 command point. The player who will take the second turn receives 2 command points. Command points allow you to use command abilities. You receive command points at the start of the battle round after that priority has been determined, but in addition, if your general is on the battlefield at the start of the hero phase, you also receive 1 command point. At the end of the battle round, any command points that have not been used are lost. To use a command ability, you must spend 1 command point, pick 1 friendly model to issue the command, and pick 1 friendly unit to receive the command. Unless noted otherwise, the models that can issue commands and the units they can issue them to are as follows. 1. Unit champions can issue commands to their own unit. 2. Heroes can issue commands to units that are wholly within 12 inches of them. 3. Generals can issue commands to units that are wholly within 18 inches of them. And 4. Totems can issue commands to units that are wholly within 18 inches of them. Each command ability will say when it can be used and what effect it has on the unit that receives it. A model cannot issue more than 1 command in the same phase, and a unit cannot receive more than 1 command in the same phase. In addition, you cannot use the same command ability more than once in the same phase, even for different units. Now we've covered the core concepts and everything we need to start playing the game, let's have a look at the phases, and we'll begin with the hero phase. At the start of the hero phase, starting with a player whose turn is taking place, each player can pick 1 hero to perform a heroic action. You can now also use friendly wizards to attempt to cast spells, friendly priests to chant prayers and attempt to banish invocations, and both to attempt to dispel endless spells. In your enemy's hero phase, you can use friendly wizards to attempt to unbind spells. This is a great part of the game. It gives you the opportunity to act and react during your opponent's turn. Each hero will have the hero keyword on their Warscroll. And if you choose them to perform a heroic action, you choose from the heroic actions table that you can see on the screen now. The effect of each heroic action is treated in the same way as the effect of an ability for rules purposes. Now you simply choose the heroic action you like to use and then follow the instructions. Each phase will give you command abilities that you can use, and there'll be 1 or more. In the hero phase, you can use the following command ability. This command ability is called Rally, and you can use it at the start of the hero phase. The unit that receives the command must be more than 3 inches from all enemy units. Roll 1 dice for each slain model from that unit. For each 6, you can return 1 slain model to that unit. The great thing about command abilities is that some can be used by the player whose turn it is, and also by the player whose turn it isn't, and in this case for the hero phase command ability, both players can choose to use it. But don't forget, it will cost you 1 command point. With the hero phase complete, now we move on to the movement phase. In your movement phase, you can pick 1 friendly unit that is more than 3 inches from all enemy units and declare that it will make a normal move, or that it will run, or you can pick 1 friendly unit that is within 3 inches of an enemy unit and declare that that unit will retreat. Once you've moved the models in that unit, you can pick another friendly unit and then do the same thing. Declare that it will make a normal move, a run, or a retreat. Continue this process until all units have moved, but you cannot pick a unit to do this again in this same phase. When you pick a unit to make a normal move, you can move each model in that unit a distance in inches equal to or less than their move characteristic, which is shown on the unit's Warscroll. It's important to note that units cannot move within 3 inches of enemy units when they are making a normal move. If at the start of the movement phase a unit is within 3 inches of an enemy unit, you can choose for them to retreat. When you pick a unit to retreat, you can move each model in that unit a distance in inches equal to or less than their move characteristic, but the unit must end the move more than 3 inches from all enemy units. When you make a retreat move, you cannot shoot or attempt a charge later in the turn with that unit. Now let's look at running. When you pick a unit to run, you must make a run roll for the unit by rolling a dice. Add the run roll to the move characteristic of all models in the unit until the end of that phase. You can then move each model in that unit a distance in inches equal to or less than their modified move characteristic. No part of a run can be made within 3 inches of an enemy unit, and you cannot shoot or attempt a charge later in the turn with that unit. As with the hero phase, during the movement phase, you've also got command abilities available to you. There are 2 in the movement phase. The first one is called At the Double, and this is used by the player whose turn it is. The second command ability in the movement phase is called Redeploy, and this is used in the enemy's movement phase. So if you're the player whose turn it isn't, you can choose to use the Redeploy, but again, both of these will cost 1 command point. When moving your units, it's really important to remember unit coherency. And if it's impossible for a unit to be coherent after it has moved, you cannot move that unit. If you make a move with any models in a unit, all of the models in the unit are considered to have made a move in that phase. If you wish, instead of making a move with a unit, you can choose for it to remain stationary. If you do so, you cannot move any of the models in the unit in that phase, but none of the models in the unit are considered to have made a move in that phase. There'll be times when you'll have to move a model around or over terrain. So let's have a look at the terrain movement rules. You can't move through terrain, so you'll have to move over or around it. When you move the model, it follows the path along the surfaces of the terrain features, but its base is assumed to remain parallel to the surface of the battlefield. You can jump down from the edge of a terrain feature to land on a lower part of the same feature or to land on the battlefield. To do so, you must trace the path of the model's move to the edge of the terrain feature and then directly down to the surface below. The distance the model drops down counts towards the distance it has moved. Some models can fly, and if they can, they'll have the fly keyword on their Warscroll. A model with a fly keyword can ignore other models and terrain features when you trace the path of its move across the battlefield. In addition, when a model that can fly starts or finishes a move on a terrain feature, instead of tracing its move across the battlefield, you can trace it through the air. So in this example, you would measure the diagonal distance. Now we've covered the hero and the movement phase, it's time to move on to the shooting phase. In your shooting phase, you can pick a friendly unit and shoot with them. When you shoot with a unit, you make shooting attacks with each model in the unit until you've shot with all the models you want to. You can then pick another friendly unit that has not shot and shoot with it, and so on until you have shot with as many of your units as you wish. When you make shooting attacks with a model, it attacks with any of the missile weapons it is armed with. If a unit is within 3 inches of any enemy units, it can only target those enemy units that are within 3 inches of it. In the shooting phase, there's a rule called Look Out Sir. For this, you must subtract 1 from the hit roll for any attack made with a missile weapon if the target is an enemy hero within 3 inches of an enemy unit that has 3 or more models. The Look Out Sir rule does not apply if the enemy hero has a wounds characteristic of 10 or more. The process of attacking and using hit rolls is the same for shooting and for close combat, so we'll look at that in detail in a little while. Before we get to that section, it's time to move on to the charge phase. In your charge phase, you can pick a friendly unit that is within 12 inches of an enemy unit to attempt a charge. You can then pick another friendly unit within 12 inches of an enemy unit to attempt a charge, and so on until you have attempted a charge with as many units as you wish. To attempt a charge, make a charge roll for the unit by rolling 2d6. You can then make a charge move with each model in that unit by moving the model a distance in inches that is equal to or less than the charge roll. The first model you move in a unit attempting a charge must finish the move within half an inch of an enemy unit. If this is impossible, then no models in the unit can make a charge move. The charge phase comes with 2 charge phase command abilities. One is called Forward to Victory. This command ability allows the unit making a charge to re-roll their charge roll. The second command ability is Unleash Hell, and you can use this after an enemy unit finishes a charge move. It allows you to shoot at them with another unit. Now we're on to the combat phase, and in the combat phase, the players alternate picking a friendly unit to fight, starting with the player whose turn is taking place. When it's your go to pick a unit to fight, you must either pick one eligible friendly unit to fight, or you must pass. A unit is eligible to fight if it is within 3 inches of an enemy unit and it has not fought in that phase, or if it made a charge move in the same turn and it has not fought in that phase. You cannot pass if there is a friendly unit that is eligible to fight. When you pick a unit to fight, first you can make a pile-in move with each model in the unit, and then you must make combat attacks with the model in the unit. That unit has then fought. If you pass, you do nothing, and the option to fight or pass goes back to your opponent. If both players pass in succession, the combat phase ends unless there are any units with strike last effects. A pile-in move is a move of up to 3 inches. When you make a pile-in move with a model, it must finish the move no further from the nearest enemy unit than it was at the start of the move. Let's take a look at strike first and strike last effects. Some abilities have an effect that allows a unit to fight at either the start or the end of the combat phase. If a strike first effect applies to any units, those units fight before all other units fight. If a strike last effect applies to any units, those units fight after all other units fight. If a strike first or strike last effect applies to units from both players' armies, the players alternate fighting with those units, starting with the player whose turn it is. This table shows you exactly when and who fights in which order. You can find this table on page 13 of the Core Rules PDF. Now we can take a look at the rules for attacking. And when you shoot or fight with a unit, you make attacks with the weapons the models in a unit are armed with. The weapons that the models in a unit are armed with are listed on their Warscroll. Missile weapons are used when models make shooting attacks, and melee weapons are used when models make combat attacks. When you shoot or fight with a unit, before you make any attacks, you must pick the target unit or units for all of the attacks that will be made by the models in the unit. Only enemy units can be picked as the target for an attack, and once the targets for the unit's attacks have been picked, you can make the attacks in the order you wish. The target of a shooting attack must be within a number of inches of the attacking model equal to the range characteristic of the weapon being used to make the attack. The range must be measured to the closest visible model in the target unit, and if you're unsure whether a model is visible, just simply stoop down and take a look from behind the shooting model. Models can see through other models in their unit. The target of a combat attack must be within a number of inches of the attacking model equal to the range characteristic of the weapon being used to make the attack, and for this, the target does not have to be visible. The number of attacks you make with any kind of weapon is equal to its attack's characteristic. Make the attacks one at a time unless you are making combined attacks. If a weapon has an attack's characteristic of more than one, you can split the attack between target units if you wish to. You can make combined attacks if all of the attacks are made by models from the same unit with the same type of weapon against the same target unit and where the same rerolls and modifiers apply to the attacks. If this is the case, make all of the hit rolls at the same time, then make all of the wound rolls, and finally make all of the save rolls. Now let's look at the attack sequence, and we use the following attack sequence for each attack made by a friendly model. The first step in the attack sequence is to make a hit roll. Roll a dice, and if the roll equals or beats the attacking weapon's 2-hit characteristic, the attack scores a hit, and now you must make a wound roll. If not, the attack fails and the attack sequence ends. An unmodified hit roll of 1 always fails, and an unmodified hit roll of 6 always hits. A hit roll cannot be modified by more than +1 or -1. Sometimes an ability will allow a single hit roll to score 2 or more hits. If this is the case, make all of the wound rolls and save rolls for those hits at the same time. Step 2, we make a wound roll. Here we roll a dice, and if the roll equals or beats the attacking weapon's to wound characteristic, the attack wounds the target and your opponent must make a save roll. If not, the attack fails and the attack sequence ends. An unmodified wound roll of 1 always fails, and an unmodified wound roll of 6 always wounds. A wound roll cannot be modified by more than +1 or -1. Now we're on to step 3, the save roll. Your opponent rolls a dice, modifying the roll by the attacking weapon's rend characteristic. If the roll equals or beats the target unit's save characteristic, the target is saved and the attack sequence ends. If not, the attack is successful and you must determine the damage that is inflicted on the target. Again, an unmodified save roll of 1 will always fail, and a save roll cannot be modified by more than +1. Notice that with a save roll, save rolls do not always succeed on unmodified rolls of 6, and they can be modified by more than -1. For example, a -2 rend. Now we're on to step 4, damage, and each successful attack inflicts damage on the target unit equal to the damage characteristic of the weapon that was used for the attack. Now we need to allocate wounds, and once all of a friendly unit's attacks have been made, add up the damage that was inflicted on each target unit. The player commanding each target unit must allocate a number of wounds to that unit equal to the damage that was inflicted on it. Once all of the damage inflicted by a unit's attacks has been allocated, that unit's attacks have been resolved. We'll have a closer look at wounds and associated rules in a moment, but first let's look at the attack command abilities that can be used in the shooting and combat phases. There are 2 command abilities. One is called All Out Attack, and this is used by the player whose turn it is, and this is going to add 1 to hit rolls for their attacks. The second is All Out Defense, and you can use this command ability when a friendly unit is picked as the target of an attack, and now you can add 1 to your save rolls. Let's look at those rules for wounds, and when we allocate wounds, they're allocated to the models in a unit 1 wound at a time. You can allocate the wounds caused to your units as you see fit. However, once you have allocated a wound to a model, you cannot allocate wounds to other models in the unit until that model is slain. If a unit is destroyed All wounds that remain to be allocated to the unit are negated and have no effect. Once the number of wounds allocated to a model equals its wounds characteristic, the model is slain and you cannot allocate any more wounds to it. A slain model is removed from play after all of the wounds caused to this unit have been allocated and all attacks that inflicted damage on the unit have been resolved. Some abilities allow you to return slain models to a unit. When this is the case, set up the models one at a time within 1 inch of a model from their unit that was not returned to the unit earlier in the phase. Slain models can only be set up within 3 inches of an enemy unit if a model in the unit they are returning to that was not returned to the unit in the same phase is already within 3 inches of that enemy unit. Now let's look at wards, and some abilities allow you to roll a dice to negate a wound before it is allocated to a model. These are called wards, and the dice roll is referred to as a ward roll. Up to 1 ward roll can be made for each wound or mortal wound before it is allocated to the model in question. If the ward roll is successful, the wound or mortal wound is negated and has no effect on the model. Some abilities allow you to heal wounds that have been allocated to a model. For each wound that is healed, reduce the number of wounds allocated to the model by 1 to a minimum of 0. You cannot heal wounds on a model that is slain. I mentioned mortal wounds there, so let's find out what they are. Some attacks, spells and abilities cause mortal wounds. Do not make hit, wound or save rolls for mortal wounds. Instead, the damage inflicted on the target is equal to the number of mortal wounds that were caused. Mortal wounds caused while a unit is attacking are allocated at the same time as wounds caused by the unit's attacks, after all of the unit's attacks have been made. Mortal wounds caused at other times are allocated as soon as they are caused. Mortal wounds are allocated in the same way as wounds and are treated in the same manner as wounds for rules purposes. Now we're on to the final phase, and that is the Battleshock Phase. In the Battleshock Phase, the players must take a Battleshock test for each friendly unit that had models slain in that turn. The player whose turn is taking place takes all their Battleshock tests first, followed by the other player. You must make a Battleshock roll for each friendly unit that has to take a Battleshock test. To make that roll, roll a dice and add the number of models in the unit that was slain in that turn to the roll. If the Battleshock roll is greater than the unit's bravery characteristic, the Battleshock test has been failed. And if the test is failed, for each point by which the roll exceeds the unit's bravery characteristic, 1 model in that unit must flee. You decide which models flee, and a model that flees is then removed from play. Sometimes your units will be split, and if a friendly unit is not coherent at the end of a turn, you must remove models in the unit from play one at a time until it is coherent. The Battleshock phase comes with 1 command ability. This is called Inspiring Presence, and you use this command ability at the start of the Battleshock phase. The unit that receives the command does not have to take Battleshock tests in that phase. But remember, it'll cost you 1 command point, and you can only issue this once to 1 unit in the phase, so choose wisely. Once the Battleshock phase is complete, you've reached the end of the battle round. The players must then check the battle pack they're using to see if the battle ends or if any special actions must be carried out. If the battle did not end, all command points that the players have remaining are lost and a new battle round begins. That's now covered the basic rules, so you've really got enough here to play your first game of Age of Sigmar. But there are a couple of other things I'd like to touch on just to help you out with your wizards, priests and your monsters. Let's look at wizards first. So in your hero phase, any wizards can attempt to cast spells. You cannot attempt to cast the same spell more than once in the same hero phase, even if it's with a different wizard. In order to attempt to cast a spell, you pick your friendly wizard, say which of the spells they know will be attempted, and then make a casting roll by rolling 2d6. If the casting roll is equal to or greater than the casting value of the spell, then the spell is successfully cast. If you roll a double 1, then the spell is miscast. The spell is not successfully cast, the caster suffers D3 mortal wounds, and the caster cannot attempt to cast any more spells in that hero phase. If the spell is successfully cast though, your opponent can pick one of their wizards, as long as it's within 30 inches of the caster, and then attempt to unbind the spell before its effects are applied. To unbind a spell, make an unbinding roll by rolling 2d6. If the roll is greater than the roll used to cast the spell, then the spell is unbound and its effects are not applied. The number of spells a wizard can attempt to unbind is noted on their Warscroll. And only one unbinding attempt can be made for each spell. Let's look at priests now, and in your hero phase you can chant prayers with friendly priests. You cannot chant the same prayer more than once in the same hero phase, even with a different priest. In order to chant a prayer, pick a friendly priest, say which of the prayers they know will be chanted, and then make a chanting roll by rolling a dice. If the chanting roll is equal to or greater than the answer value of the prayer is answered. On an unmodified chanting roll of 1, the chanting priest suffers divine wrath. The prayer is not answered, and the chanting priest suffers 1 mortal wound. Now let's look at monsters, and a unit with a monster keyword on its Warscroll is a monster. At the end of the charge phase, you can carry out a monstrous rampage, and each player can carry out 1 monstrous rampage from the table that you can see here with each friendly monster. The player whose turn is taking place carries out all of their monstrous rampages first. The same player cannot carry out the same monstrous rampage more than once per phase. The effect of the monstrous rampage is treated in the same way as the effect of an ability for rules purposes. Now we've gone through all the core concepts, the war scrolls, we've looked at the phases, and a little bit extra looking at the wizards, priests and monsters. That should give you everything you need to know to play your first game of Age of Sigmar. Come and join me for further videos in the series where I go through army planning and building, terrain rules, battle plans, and I've also got lots of videos on my channel showing you how to build and paint different models in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and loads of content for Warcry 2. You can also find how to play guides for Warhammer 40,000, Horus Heresy, Kill Team and Warcry. I hope this video is helpful, and especially in getting you started playing your first game. Age of Sigmar is great fun and I'd love to hear how you get on. Thank you so much for watching. If you did like the video, please hit the like button. Consider subscribing, it'd be awesome to see you here again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video on Tabletop Skirmish Games. If you'd like to support the channel and help me to keep going with these daily videos, there's loads of ways you can do it. You can join my Patreon, you can order through the affiliate links in the description, or you can simply leave a tip and buy me a pot of paint. However you choose to support me in the channel, I'm very grateful and couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters. It's really awesome that you've been here right from the start, and I can't thank you enough.